Really quick before we get to the video, I'll be attending G-Fest in Rosemont, Illinois from July 10th through the 12th. If you see me, feel free to stop by and say hello. Hope to see you there. Following the success of Ultra Q, executives at the Tokyo Broadcasting System moved very quickly. They wanted another series from Eiji Tsuburaya almost immediately, and they arrived with firm requirements. The new show had to be shot in color, it had to feature a scientific investigation team, and it needed a central hero who could fight monsters directly, rather than just simply observing them like the team in Ultra Q did. The commercial infrastructure built around Ultra Q had made it very clear how much licensing revenue a hit tokusatsu property could generate, and the Tokyo Broadcasting System wanted something designed from the start to support that kind of merchandising. What followed was a long and frequently redirected development process. Tsuburaya and writer Tetsuo Kinjo initially developed a concept called WOO, or W-O-O, built around a gentle alien and its relationship with humanity. The approach leaned into mood and quiet science fiction drama. The Tokyo Broadcasting System reviewed it and declined, asking for something that's more action-heavy. The next attempt introduced a giant protector named Bemular, a monster-like hero who battled other creatures to defend Earth. Early designs gave him exaggerated creature-heavy features, and when executives saw the artwork, they were uncertain whether he even read as being a hero. He felt more like a villain. The project redirected again. The hero was redesigned with a humanoid form, merged with a human character after an accident, and the concept was renamed Redman. This version also formalized the idea of a scientific defense organization operating alongside the giant, which became the Science Special Search Party, later shortened to the Science Patrol. By early 1966, the Redman concept had been approved. The series was then renamed Ultraman to maintain continuity with Ultra Q, and the two shows were visually connected through their opening sequences. The human host became Shin Hayata, played by Susumu Kurobe, while Hiroko Sakurai returned from Ultra Q to play Akiko Fuji. This gave the new series an immediate sense of continuity for audiences following from the earlier show. Toll Narita, who handled character and monster design, spent considerable effort making Ultraman's silver body and red markings legible on color television, where the contrast between the hero's clean, ordered silhouette and the chaotic textures of the kaiju would carry a lot of the visual storytelling. The color timer on Ultraman's chest was added late in development over Narita's objections, as a practical solution to impose a time limit on the battles, and give each episode a natural dramatic endpoint. Bin Furuya was cast as the suit performer, chosen for his height and the precision of his movement. Principal photography began in March 1966 and fell behind almost immediately. Producing a weekly effects-heavy series in color was a genuinely new industrial challenge. Live-action scenes were shot on 16mm film to reduce costs, while effects footage required 35mm film and multiple crews working simultaneously across overlapping production blocks just to keep the episodes moving. The same city sets were being rebuilt and repurposed, monster suits were reused and modified wherever possible. One episode went as far as to reshape an existing Godzilla suit into the creature Jiris. By early summer, the first episode still wasn't finished. The Tokyo Broadcasting System filled the original scheduled slot on July 10th with a live stage presentation called The Birth of Ultraman. Production was rushed and troubled enough that at least one director requested a pseudonym on the credits as opposed to being directly associated with it. This is actually a very common practice. Here in America, there's a pseudonym known as Alan Smithy. So if a director is ever dissatisfied with the finished product, they can take their name off the movie and say that it was directed by Alan Smithy. An example of this is Dune, the David Lynch film, which in future re-releases, mainly I believe the TV broadcast, it said directed by Alan Smithy, not David Lynch. So for a show to be that rough, it's clear that people didn't have much faith in this, especially those that were involved. Was the budget there? Absolutely. Did the executives think this would work? Who knows? But despite everything, the live special drew over 30% of the viewing audience, and it actually eased concerns at the network about what was coming. And what came was Ultraman. Premiering on July 17th, 1966, it immediately became a fixture of Sunday evening television. The first episode pulled in roughly 34.4% of viewers, and ratings continued climbing from there. The production pressure didn't ease once broadcast began, as effects artists began drawing beam attacks directly onto the film frames, and the suit actors were working under punishing heat inside the rubber suits while navigating miniature sets rigged with pyrotechnics, all while the writing staff is arguing constantly over tone. These tensions peaked during the Skydun episode, which committed fully to broad comedy and reportedly got heated enough behind the scenes to turn physical before it aired to a receptive audience. Any Ultraman fan knows that merchandising is really the heart of this. It expanded rapidly throughout the original run, with figures and monsters like Red King and Bemular being nearly as recognizable as Ultraman himself. The series ran for 39 episodes, with the final one airing in April of 1967, showing Ultraman gravely wounded, Earth defended through the collective effort of the Science Patrol, and the hero returning to space. The Tokyo Broadcast System commissioned a follow-up series almost immediately, and Ultra 7 would premiere later in 1967 with a new hero, a new cast. We're not going to get into it, because technically Shin Hayata's story closes here. I know there's follow-ups, we'll get into it. But before we get into the actual run-through of the show, we got to talk about the international distribution, because that's how people like me discovered the show. United Artists Television commissioned an English dub under Peter Fernandez in 1967, and this is what put the show into American syndication, where it remained in circulation for decades. Long before I ever watched a single episode of Ultraman, I already knew who he was. As a kid, Toho Kingdom and various kaiju internet fan forums were basically my second home, and Ultraman came up constantly in those spaces. Whether it was Red King, Alien Baltan, Alakeen, the whole Rogues Gallery got discussed alongside Godzilla and Gamera, as if they all inhabited the same world and the same conversations, which in a way it definitely did. G-Fest deepened that familiarity when I attended for the first time in 2007. There was Ultraman merchandise everywhere. There were fans in costumes, there were panels, and in a way, this series was treated with the same reverence as the Godzilla Toho films or the Daiei Gamera films. Around the same time, a Godzilla stop-motion Lego series on YouTube had the protagonist transforming into Ultraman to fight alongside Godzilla against monsters like Alakeen and Gigan, which at the time felt like the coolest thing imaginable. I still can't actually track down that series, so if you can find that exact one, I will be so happy. I know Hayata had like the Nightwing hairpiece. Whatever. Might be a topic for another day. Even so, most of what I knew about Ultraman had come through osmosis rather than anything I'd actually sat down and watched. All of that changed around 2010 when I was at Target with my mom, and we found a DVD box set of the original 1966 series sitting on a shelf. She bought it for me, and I remember getting home and putting it in the DVD player as soon as I could. For whatever reason, I didn't start with the first episode, and instead I landed on the second episode, which was Alien Baltan, and it caught me completely off guard. The tone was like nothing I had ever seen from a children's tokusatsu series. It felt really dark. It was closer to a horror show than anything. I loved the mystery aspect of it. There was this creeping sense of dread that Baltan himself only made worse. My grandpa and I had always watched The Twilight Zone together on TV, and sitting there with this episode, that's exactly what it brought to mind. From that afternoon on, I was completely sold, and I became a fan of Ultraman. So what is the show even about? The Science Patrol is a small investigative unit tasked with responding to the kind of threats that conventional military force and conventional science can't adequately address. So the usual fare, monster attacks, alien incursions, phenomena that simply don't fit any existing framework. Think what we saw in Ultra Q, but dialed to 11. The pilot episode introduces all of this effectively, and without any fuss. The characters are established, Bemular serves as the first monster that the team faces, and I just can't get over how perfect of a pilot episode this is, as the characters are sketched in very quickly and very clearly. The world feels so lived in from the opening scene, and the episode moves with enough confidence that it never feels like a show still trying to find its feet. A lot of pilot episodes kind of have that vibe of, okay, this character's not exactly established, this one isn't acting right. It sort of feels like a trial run, because that's what a pilot episode is, right? However, with Ultraman, This just works from the get-go. This show kind of just hits the ground running. You're never thinking, oh, this is going to get better, I'm going to stick with this. The first run of episodes are complete masterpieces, in my opinion. In this pilot episode too, we also get the central premise, which is an alien comes down to Earth, Ultraman has to fight it. It doesn't have to be an alien, sometimes it's a Earthborn monster, but whatever. This is where we get the setup of Ultraman as a character. His spacecraft collides with Hayata's ship, and the alien inside is a being from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, and it merges with Hayata to save his life, constantly finding moments to slip away from the Science Patrol, raise the Beta Capsule, and transform into Ultraman. The second episode, Shoot the Invaders, introduces Alien Baltan, and again, I've said this before, this is my favorite episode in the entire series, maybe the entire franchise. The episode is structured around E-Day recounting the events directly to the audience. It's the only time the show ever breaks the fourth wall, but I kinda like it. It's corny, it feels like a campfire ghost story, and it really fits the tone of the episode, especially as it goes on and gets into horror territory. The Baltans are bizarre and unsettling to look at. I love how they're human-sized for most of the episode before finally scaling up to the kaiju form for the finale. The show takes its time to establish that their home planet was destroyed, and this makes them more of like a refugee civilization, so you feel a level of sympathy, except for the fact that they want to, annihilate all of humanity in order to claim Earth as their own. Again, it's just fantastic storytelling. Episode 4, 5 seconds before the explosion, centers on Ragon or Ragon. I guess the dub says different pronunciations. I've always just said Ragon, like Ronald Reagan. Forgive my Midwest trash accent. Ragon is an amphibious creature that attacks with this predatory hunger that in a way reminds me a lot of the Gargantuas from War of the Gargantuas, and especially in the airport scene. That, to me, feels almost like a direct homage to the Gargantuas. Even though I'm pretty sure that this episode came out around the exact same time that movie did, so maybe it's just parallel thinking, or Tsuburaya just having fun with the same concept but different monsters. One of my all-time favorite moments is the nighttime ship attack sequence. It's so creepy. Ragon's glowing eyes just cut through the darkness, and there's this absurd quality to the moment where a small child with a butter knife actually manages to wound the thing, but the episode plays it completely straight. Skipping ahead a bit to 2 episodes later, the Lawless Monster Zone takes a different approach entirely, populating its setting with multiple monsters at once. Red King's introduction is so cool. Oh, he's so dangerous. I love it. If you were sick of seeing Ultraman just fighting different monsters, you're going to see monsters fighting other monsters here. This is also where we get the introduction of Pigman, a small and clearly non-threatening creature. What I like is how he befriends the Science Patrol and then is killed by Red King while distracting him from attacking the team. It's supposed to be emotional, but I don't know. I kind of just laugh at it every time. It's so stupid. I love it. Episode 10, The Mysterious Dinosaur Base, has become one of the most discussed installments in the series for reasons that have very little to do with the script or really anything besides the main monster. Jiris. Yes, let's address the elephant in the room. Jiris is just Godzilla with a frill. Haru Nakajima even played this character, so this episode is basically Ultraman versus Godzilla, and I love it. The last time I was at G-Fest, I bought this statue of Jiris, and good lord, is it awesome. But moving away from the surface level observation of Ultraman versus Godzilla episode, I think that the mystery here really works. In a way, it kind of reminds me of Titanosaurus from Terror of Mechagodzilla, where it's this mad scientist trying to kind of keep everything under control, and of course, with giant monster movies, shit hits the fan. But the way that information is gradually sprinkled to the audience works so well. Episode 18, Brother from Another Planet, introduces alien Zerub, who stands apart from the show's other antagonists by refusing direct confrontation altogether. Zerub disguises himself as Ultraman and then commits crimes while wearing that form. and works to turn public opinion against the hero entirely. The conflict becomes a battle of wits as opposed to a battle of strength, which is a structure that the show doesn't return to often enough, I feel. There's nothing better than the trope where a strong character who can easily beat anyone up has to outwit them. You get this a lot with some of the best runs of Superman, especially when he's going up against whether Lex Luthor or Brainiac or Mr. Monoplix. I can't say it. But the guy where you have to say his name backwards. But what I'm getting at is, I love how most of the threat comes from here as opposed to here. You can't really punch your way out of it, and that's what's so fun about it. Something else I love about this run of Ultraman, and I guess most runs as it goes on, is that this series is largely episodic. You can really just pick up and put down any episode, and it really doesn't matter. So if you see a monster that you like, you can just sort of watch that episode and move on. You don't have to go through all the arcs or whatever. It's kind of nice, especially for someone like me who's just bad with serialized TV shows. I can binge watch Family Guy all day, but when it comes to like Breaking Bad, I take like 6 months to watch 3 episodes. I'm sorry. But what's cool about Ultraman is that it earns its most significant dramatic moments by occasionally refusing to resolve things cleanly. Episode 23 is the clearest example. An astronaut has been so completely transformed by years of being stranded in an alien environment that he returns to Earth as a monster, unable to communicate. The Science Patrol and Ultraman both engage him directly, but it's the government that kills him, exploiting his weakness to water, while Ide watches with tears running down his face, and he says nothing. A government representative immediately delivers a speech honoring him as a hero, and the Science Patrol goes along with it. The show never addresses this again, which really works. On one hand, you could say, oh wow, they never addressed this huge character beat, what a poorly written show. But on the other hand, they are government officials. They're supposed to witness horrific stuff and then just move on with their life. Episodes 26 and 27 form the show's most ambitious two-parter, built around Gamora, a monster powerful enough to actually beat Ultraman. The first episode ends with Ultraman being overwhelmed and unable to continue, leaving Gamora rampaging as the credits roll, and the second raises the stakes further when Hayato loses the Beta Capsule, temporarily preventing him from turning into Ultraman. But of course, Ultraman prevails in the end. These 2 episodes do real work in establishing that nothing about that outcome is guaranteed, and that Ultraman is beatable, which makes the series more fun to watch. I think in a show like this, where it's a monster of the week, you can get used to just seeing the hero win every single time, so a wild card like this really changes things, and I love that. Episode 33, The Forbidden Words, is widely considered to be Tetsuo Kinjo's finest script for the series, as alien Mephiles has no interest in destroying anything. His plan is to get a young boy to speak the words, "I give you the earth," reasoning that a voluntary surrender constitutes a legitimate claim on the planet. Again, this is another mental episode as opposed to physically fighting another monster. The episode builds to a direct confrontation between Mephiles and Ultraman that plays out as a philosophical argument rather than a physical one, with Mephiles treating Ultraman as an intellectual equal, and the debate carrying genuine moral weight. Kinjo rarely got to slow the show down to this degree, and the episode stands as evidence of what the series was capable of when it was given the space to think. I can't get over it. I might get shit on for this, I don't know. There are times where I would consider this to be on par with some of the greatest stage plays of all time. It's an awesome concept. Again, I hate comparing this stuff to the Twilight Zone because it feels so obvious, but this just feels like a Twilight Zone episode. Episode 35, The Monster Graveyard, does something really unusual. The premise is that there's a graveyard in space where the bodies of defeated and dead monsters drift, but they're disturbed when a rocket passes through it. Bozu emerges as the central creature, and the episode includes glimpses of previously defeated kaiju, like Naranga and Ragan, as we see their bodies just drifting through the void, lifeless. It's also just cool to think about because, we're 30 plus episodes in, Ultraman has killed 30 plus monsters, and the bodies have to go somewhere, and the fact that the show actually bothered to give an in-universe reason as to what Ultraman does with the corpses of these monsters is really cool for a children's tokusatsu show. I mentioned it very, very briefly at the start, but I honestly believe that the final episode brings everything to a close without softening anything. Obviously, I'm not speaking on any recent TV shows that wrapped up and had very lackluster endings. I'm not referencing Game of Thrones or Stranger Things or The Boys. But this might be one of the greatest endings to any TV show ever. I'm not even joking. In the finale, Ultraman faces Zeton, an alien weapon deployed against him with deliberate passion, and he loses badly. A second being from Ultraman's home planet named Zoffy arrives to retrieve him, and it's here that the show delivers its sharpest moment. Zoffy basically says, look, I will take you home, but we need to separate you from Hayata, and in doing so, Hayata will lose every memory of his time as Ultraman. And so, he does it. Hayata survives, but he wakes up holding the beta capsule with no idea why it's in his hand or what any of it even meant. Ultraman leaves for space, and Hayata walks away from the wreckage, a stranger to the last 39 episodes of his life. It's peak. It's so good. Oh, it reminds me of Men in Black, at the end of that movie where J memory wipes K, and you're just like, oh, I get that same vibe here. The 39 episodes of the original Ultraman series established an entire new industry. Before the show's broadcast, Tokusatsu television existed in isolated pockets without a coherent commercial framework sustaining it. After Ultraman's ratings demonstrated the scale of the audience, Japanese broadcasters spent the better part of a decade competing to produce their own version of the same thing. A period historians and fans refer to as the Kaiju Boom. Toei responded with Kamen Rider in 1971, which applied the Transformation Hero concept to a ground-level motorcycle action format and proved the audience for this material extended well beyond just kaiju spectacle. 4 years later, Toei would launch the very first entry in the Super Sentai franchise, which Western audiences would eventually encounter in the 90s as the Power Rangers. I mean, I could go on and on about this. I could talk about Inframan, which super underrated. And I could even talk about the Spider-Man Toei show that existed, which has been talked about to death on the internet, but I don't care. When the new Spider-Man movie comes out, I might honestly make a video on that since it's really cool. This series rules, man. Spider-Man has a machine gun and just shoots people. Getting back to Ultraman, and I guess Tokusatsu as a whole, the market those shows all entered and the audience appetite they were built to satisfy existed because Ultraman had proven it was there. The commercial model the series established proved to be equally durable. It's the Monster of the Week format. You introduce a new monster, and then you get to sell toys of said monster. Rinse and repeat every single week. Like, this just opens up an even bigger can of worms. I could go into the Sofubi boom, where the soft vinyl toys completely reshaped Japanese manufacturing and retail. I mean, there were figures of Baltan and Red King that children were buying in 1966, and it was flying off store shelves. And so it kind of rippled into modern Ultraman just sort of being about selling toys and nothing else. Hot take, I know. But essentially, Tsuburaya Productions was sustained by this licensing revenue in ways that allowed the company to keep producing new entries for decades. And the collector culture surrounding Ultraman and Tokusatsu toys today is a direct continuation of what those original Sofubi figures started. I mean, good lord, look at my background. I'm a grown man, by the way. I apologize for this. The structural DNA of the original Ultraman series also worked its way into the corners of Japanese pop culture well beyond the tokusatsu genre. Hideaki Anno, who wrote Shin Ultraman in 2022, and has spoken extensively about his tokusatsu influences throughout his career, built the premise of Neon Genesis Evangelion around ideas that read as a darker and more psychologically complex version of Ultraman. The Evangelions are giant humanoids defending a city, piloted by a young person carrying an enormous secret burden, operating on strict energy limits that function as a narrative pressure valve in almost exactly the same way that the color timer does with Ultraman. The anxiety running through Evangelion, the psychological cost of the transformation, the isolation of the person doing it, engages directly with questions the original Ultraman series had been asking since 1966. If you would like to hear me ramble and yap for an hour plus about Neon Genesis Evangelion, I made a video talking all about that. It's right here on the channel. Go check it out. I mean, if you want to keep talking about Ultraman's legacy, though, how many times have you seen someone reference this in anime, in a movie, in a TV show? I mean, the Ultraman pose has been mimicked so many times. I see it referenced constantly.
That's a vibrator. No? No? I thought it was a... really? I think that's a vibrator. Someone gave this to him as a prank. He doesn't know.
For all of that legacy, the most remarkable thing about the original 1966 run of Ultraman is how well it holds up entirely on its own terms. The show has a distinct identity built from specific and irreplaceable parts, with Toll Narita's monster designs, a human cast with genuine chemistry and clearly defined personalities, a musical score that manages to be simultaneously groovy and deeply eerie, incredible sound design that gives every fight sequence a texture and weight that modern productions consistently struggle to replicate, and of course, the phenomenal filmmaking and craft involved. I've said this before on the channel, but I could spend hours just gushing about miniature cities and giant monster costumes, and it's clear that this show has some of the best you'll ever see, especially on a TV budget. Episodes like The Forbidden Words demonstrate that the writers were actually interested in pushing the format somewhere thoughtful, and the show earns those ambitions because it never loses sight of the basics that make the monster fights satisfying in the first place. The contrast with what the franchise eventually became makes the original feel even more remarkable. This might be where I lose some people, so I apologize, but contemporary Ultraman productions introduce new transformation devices, new power-up forms, and new collectible accessories at a pace that makes the commercial machinery underneath impossible to ignore. The 1966 series predates that model entirely. The Beta Capsule is a single object with a single function, and the show's attention is always on the characters and the creatures as opposed to the hardware. Watching it now, 60 years after it first aired, it still feels like a creative team working at the height of their abilities on something that they genuinely believed in, and no other entry in the franchise has ever or will ever come close to matching it.
Ultraman, arigato. Ultraman.
And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You are watching Firewood Media. This is part 2 of my Ultraman retrospective series. If you're curious to know what the deal is with this, I have said before that I might not cover the entire franchise since it is like 60 years worth of content and there's multiple TV shows, multiple movies. It's a lot to talk about. And frankly, I don't want to dedicate a good portion of my life to talking about just Ultraman. I think what I'll probably do is cover the series and runs that I like in depth, and then when I get to the later era, I'll just kind of speed run through them in a very large video, just very quickly summarizing everything, giving my thoughts on it, and then moving on. Otherwise, when I make that supercut and I cover every single franchise and run in depth, it's going to be like a 40-hour plus video, and I'm not Quentin Reviews. I can't do that. The Ultra Q video is out now. You can go and check that out. The next one, Ultra 7, should be out either this month or next month. It's written. I just have to film it. I'm in the process of moving at the minute, so this backdrop is going to change. Whether or not I will film Ultra 7 before I move, I don't know. Speaking of, when I am finally settled in, I plan on live streaming more frequently, hopefully locking down a specific day and time every week when I will stream. And I'll also be posting more videos in general because I'll have more of a dedicated space to do so. There'll be an actual background that looks nice. It won't just be this. So I'm very excited for that. I will post a studio tour and a Godzilla collection video to the channel. I know it's been a while since I posted a Godzilla collection video. I just wanted to kind of wait a bit until I had more stuff to share. I definitely do now. So since I'm moving, I'll be taking everything off the shelves, reorganizing it, and I'll just film the video while I do that. I'll also be at G-Fest in Rosemont, Illinois in July this year. I'll be staying there all weekend. So if you're going to be there, look for me. I won't be hard to miss. I'm 6'8". I'm a giant. You should be able to just see me. If you're new to the channel, hi, welcome. Consider subscribing if you like what I had to say about Ultraman or kaiju stuff in general. I talk about other movies as well. I just posted a video on Obsession, which I will have that right up here. You can check out my Evangelion video. There's a lot to see here. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can support the channel by becoming a channel member. You get access to our members-only podcast. So if you like the videos of me talking about Godzilla with Zeth from J&Z Productions, you can get more of that on the members-only podcast, where it's him and I talking about really anything that we want. It's great. It's about an hour long each month. And then there's also members-only videos. There's early access to videos, like you could have seen this one early. And on top of that, too, you get access to the Discord server. But of course, I appreciate you just watching this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.